Selling in place means after the COVID-19 and the recession that is going to follow that, and et cetera, the ability and the interest in traveling, going and visiting customers face to face by getting on a plane, a train, a car, whatever, is going to go way down. And the other side of it is their willingness to see you is going to diminish. There are big deals getting done. So a couple of things that are being done is immediately you have to be relevant to what is the problem someone needs to have solved inside of the next 60 days.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's most downloaded B2B sales show. If you haven't already, make sure to click subscribe. And on today's show, we have the legend that is Tom Searcy of huntbigsales.com. And in this episode, we're getting into what Tom does best, how to close huge sales, but pivoting to the climate that we're living in, how to close huge sales from home, from selling in place. Everything that we talk about is available in the show notes of this episode over at salesman.org. And so with that, let's jump right into it. Today, we're going to talk about closing big deals, big sales in the current uncertain economic climate. We can perhaps put some definitions on these in the next kind of 20 minutes, half an hour as we record. But before we get to that, I know you've got a book, a webinar, and other things down the pipeline around selling in place, which will tie into everything that we're going to talk about today's episode, Tom. So, Tom, what is selling in place? What does that mean?
Selling in place means after the COVID-19 and the recession that is going to follow that, and et cetera, the ability and the interest in traveling, going and visiting customers face to face by getting on a plane, a train, a car, whatever, is going to go way down. And the other side of it is their willingness to see you is going to diminish. So now you have to accomplish the same kinds of sales activities, big sales, which is what I focus on and our company focuses on. You're going to have to do that while you are in place, sitting in, maybe you're working from home, maybe you're working in a cubicle or an office or whatever. You're going to have to do that in place using the technology, Skype or Zoom, and you're going to have to use, obviously, phone calls and emails and texts. But what you used to do by visiting, say, 1 or 2 or 3 times to develop trust in a relationship, you're going to have to do that differently. You're going to have to do that at distance. And that's what selling in place means, is that if you used to take 3 meetings face-to-face to get something accomplished, they don't want to see you 3 times. They can't see you 3 times. Maybe you don't want to go 3 times. Maybe it'll be 0. Maybe it'll be 1, but it's going to be different.
So and we connected on before we click record here, I have done a little bit of traveling with the salesman.org brand and the podcast. And it was when I was there and we were meeting people, doing the events, doing the live shows, great. That was 3 or 4 hours. The 12 hours either side, especially traveling from the UK to the US, terrible. And so we've not done it in 4 years since then, right? So, but it's one thing for me to say this, Tom, and the size of deals that we do, selling sales training and that side of things. So that's one anecdote. But from your perspective, I know you've been selling in place for a long time now. How did you come to the conclusion that it's actually possible to do this? Because that's going to be the first mindset shift that people have to make, right? That this is physically possible to close big deals from selling in place.
I would like to tell you that it was some brilliant, insightful thing, but like many things, we backed into it. All right. We started in a position or period of time in which we didn't have enough financial resources to be flying around for every interested party. So we began developing. And I say developing, meaning what would it take for us to do? We're very systemic in our approach to things, for us to do this without traveling. And we laid it out. But this was a dozen years ago because we just said, I can't afford to go and do that. So our first step was to say, we're not going, this is going to be hard to believe, but we'd say, we're not going anywhere that someone hasn't paid us to show up. Mm-hmm. So everything that we do, and whether it's paid to show up because that means that someone's taking the first load of medical equipment, or they're taking the first order of product, or they're having the first set of services delivered, that needs to show up with a purchase order or a price tag attached to it. So once we made that decision, we backed up every step to say, how does that last decision get made where they say close? All right. So what's the decision that has to be made before that? And the decision before that? And who has to be in each of those decisions? Because final purchases, especially in our world, which is 4, 5, 6, 7 figures in size, and typically it's 5, mostly 6 figure, and then 7 figure deals. They don't come to that decision by, hi, I wanted to go ahead and buy hundreds of thousands of dollars of things. Please send it to me. I wish it was that easy. Instead, it's a series of decisions. So we backed up from the last choice and worked the process all the way back to the first choice.
So for the salesperson, the individual who's listening to this now, let's use my example of medical device sales. So this might not be the best example because we'll split it to two. So pre-sale, I'd go and do a physical demo. So perhaps some of that can be replaced, perhaps some of it can't. So we won't dive too far into that. But then also after the fact, I'd spend a lot of time in the account to do training. So we'll ignore that. So pre-sale, right? What shifts do I need to make when I'm selling surgeons and they perhaps expect me to pop into the theatre as I'm traveling around these different hospitals as opposed to ringing them? Theatre managers, procurement officers, people like that, again, doing 5, 6, 7-figure deals. How do I change their mindset on selling from place? How do I communicate with them that it might be better for everyone?
Great question. There's lots of pieces to that question. Matter of fact, we have several clients of ours that are in the medical devices business. And so I have some experience in talking about that. Let's start off with item number one is how do I become a recognized expert inside of that area, that market, that industry? And there's many ways to do it. Podcasts and webinars are part of that. And video segments are part of that. And doing those kinds of in-place conversations where they're in place. The thing we forget about when we're selling in place is that our buyers are now in place. They're not going to the conferences that they used to in the past. They're not taking the meetings from somebody on the outside. You look threatening. You may have, COVID-19 or whatever the issue is at the time. So,
or just a terrible haircut, which I think most of us have right now.
We've all moved there. So whatever it is, they're going to buy more in place, and you're going to sell more in place. The first thing is to be able to be recognized and put energy and time into being that expert. People say, gosh, we don't have enough time. If you don't get on the plane, you'd be amazed how much time you have. So invest in being that expert. Second thing is that what is it that really happens during that first meeting? Typically, it is really all about one word. It's all about trust. Now, you think it's about showing the device or the piece of material or manufactured things or services, but really what's occurring in that first meeting is trust. You did a demo, for example, so they could see that. They interact with you and they trust you. They interact with the piece of equipment. They trust it. And they say, okay, I've seen some of that, but I need to understand more. What they're saying is, I need a deeper sense of trust as we're moving through this process. So instead of moving the question along of how do I get this in front of them so that it builds trust, what do I need to do that builds this trust? Is it possible in a conversation like yours and mine right now where I could walk through the video of that and I could say, this is how this works, and I'm only going to take 10 or 15 minutes of your time. We're going to do this right here. I'm going to show this to you. Maybe I'm going to send you a sample and we'll go through that face to face. And some of our other clients, I'm not saying that yours fits in it. Some of our other clients can do that. And then they reconnect. Part of the beginning of the trust is to say, one of the reasons we're doing this right now is we know how busy you are and how valuable your time is. And so for you to evaluate what we're going to do and how we could do it together, I could take 10 hours of your time to do that, or we could do it this way, and you'll come to a decision in less than 2. So now there's a fundamental belief, and forgive me for backing up, Will, but there's a past belief that trust requires presence. And I need to be face-to-face to develop trust. What happens if that all shifts into selling in place, where I'm moving trust forward with mechanisms other than physical proximity? So you asked me the question, well, what do I do? The first thing you do is you figure out a way to create a sense of trust around your own expertise. Declare it about yourself and declare it about your business and declare it about your product while you're in place. The second thing is to create an opportunity and a system that says, how is trust created inside of my product and my company when I have a first contact? So if you move that all the way down because every part of that, you and I think would agree. People always call it relationship and they call it about other things. Those are all true, but my belief about that is not affection, it's trust. And so you're really developing a trust. Maybe it's based upon the both of us like the same football team, or that we have children, and those stories back and forth. I think that's part of it. But it really comes into
Tom, how much of us traveling and going visiting people and spending time in an office, and then I'm sure you've been there as well, perhaps not in where you are right now, but other jobs and roles you've been in the past, where you show up and then the person says, I'm busy, can't see you today, and then you've driven all that way. Or I know this with surgeons, they've got stuck in theatre and I can't go and hang out with them now. How much of all of that is just through a lack of creativity and almost laziness? And now when we can't do that, there's going to be a massive shift in sales towards selling at a distance, selling in place, where we're going to have more creative options that are actually going to end up probably being better for the end consumer.
I think they will be. You made the point just a few moments ago about being a mindset. So allow me just a little story. When you'd get up on Sunday night or Monday morning, and you planned your week out, right? And if you looked at it, you had these hours that you were going to travel, this meeting that you were going to go to, these hours that you were going to travel back, and all of those things. You start looking at the week. And then you also look at the administrative meetings that you've been called into. I'm probably not the last person who has figured out that if I can book my sales calls on top of those administrative meetings I don't want to go to, right, then I'm actually using a better efficient use of my time. Fair enough. So I'm fighting for every selling minute I can get in a week. If I have to travel very much to do it, I have fewer minutes. What if I don't have to travel? See, most of us evaluate and show our achievement by how filled our calendar is for the week. What if you pulled all of that away and you said, I used to only get, say, 6 to 8 sales calls in a week done. Now I can get 10, 11, or 12 done, and I can do it in this way right now. And if the person says at the last minute, oh, I can't make it, I have no travel investment. I move on to the next productive thing that I could be doing. Studies show for salespeople who are working on a regular basis, they are effectively selling less than 13 hours a week. Because you take out all the travel, you take all the administrative meetings, you take all the rest of that out, and you say time in front of a customer, time in preparation for that meeting, or time right after that, which we would all include in sales, 13 hours a week. So if I could just take it up to 15 or 16, look at the efficiency. I've gained 25% increase in efficiency without all the wastefulness. I mean, you say how much time you show up and they're not available. How many times do you wind up getting stuck on a flight and not able to take your flight? Miss a train, right? Get stuck in traffic. All those things are
and there's all the emotional elements of that, and just a pure fatigue of showing up to a meeting. I know from flying from the UK, we've been over to San Francisco for a couple of like big sponsorship deals and different things that we've done with brands, Salesforce, HubSpot, people like that over there. By the time I get there, I'm a mess. Never mind ready to rock and roll. Whereas if we were doing it remotely, I'd just have a lie-in in the morning, get up a bit later, and then be ready to rock and roll at 8 or 9 in the afternoon or the evening here in the UK. So there seems that there's multiple elements to all this. But Tom, does it all hinge on, as the words you described, what we need to become, does it all hinge on being a recognized expert? Does any of this work when we are just Joe Schmo who sells random widget, or do we need to be recognized as an expert in our space to be able to leverage all of this?
There's two paths, as you said earlier, two paths to this. One is that it is great to be an expert in your space. All right. Now, if you've written a paper or something is relevant to what's going on in your market or whatever, whether it's an article or some sort of a digital material that's been put together, it's great to refer to that as a way to back up your expertise, or at least your opinion about expertise. All of that is really, I go back to the same thing. The core to that is about increasing a base of trust, of confidence that this is real, because I'm talking to someone who is an expert or is referring to me to materials that demonstrate that. The second part of it is, what is the purpose of connection when I am selling in place? It's about building trust. I have to review what is it that creates that trust. They don't have time for 3 phone calls for you to set appointments and get things, etc. Their answer is, I only have enough time for you to establish up front. That's why expertise is so important. It either has to come through on the video or on the phone right away, or they're going to shut you off. They're not going to see. You can't say, well, I'll meet with you at the conference, right? Or I'll see you at this event. It's not going to happen. So how are you going to develop trust? Quickly. And that's going to come around what's valuable to them, which is what? Expertise.
So a salesperson, I know I'm kind of pushing you down a pathway here when the answer is both. But if a salesperson listens to this now, a member of Sales Nation, they have the next week to invest into themselves, do some training, whatever it is. Should they invest in their personal brand, rejig their LinkedIn profile, have a think about whether they can publish some kind of content and raise their status to whatever it needs to be to get attention in their marketplace? Or should they spend that same amount of time, if you could only do one or the other, building content that will help them build trust in a meeting? So speak to their marketing team and leverage the brand trust of the organization as opposed to focus on themselves as an individual.
The thing about expertise is it's your ability to understand and source it rather than your ability to create it. So if you can just say, all right, I'm going to find 5 relevant articles that I think are insightful about the marketplace, about your company, about whatever, and have those in my queue, then I can say, I thought, as I was preparing for today's call, it reminded me of one of the treatises that I read recently, or one of the articles that I read recently that really backs up what we're talking about. I'll send that along to you. You're able to co-opt someone else's expertise as an issue of mind frame set. I think like you think, or I think like you should think, based upon what I've read or understood here. That's what makes me more of an expert, is because I'm better developed and better put together. In doing that, you're really doing both things. You're providing a representation of your own expertise and your own value, as well as that who's been hired by the company for whom you work. The ability to cross-pollinate those is really the responsibility of the salesperson. Now, yes, everyone's going to check your LinkedIn because you're supposed to be important and understanding and an expert. So make sure that your LinkedIn group shows that about you. You should be a part of other LinkedIn groups that are relevant to what you do. And you can publish inside of those or respond to those without having to go get a big marketing analysis put together. That gives you additional credibility because that's been published and you can pull that, call on that. So I know you told me not to say both. This is going to sound terrible. I'm going to say it anyway. I don't trust marketing departments very much. Okay, I don't trust them because I have difficulty with the marketing department sometimes because I feel that they're a little slow on their feet. They're not nimble. Secondly, the majority of what they're saying is broadcast in nature, not laser focused in nature. So they're trying to say something that is relevant to 100 people. And so in my opinion, when I'm making a sales call, it's irrelevant to all of them. And it's not necessarily helpful in my conversation. And if I send somebody a marketing piece or a whatever, when was the last time someone said, I thoroughly read your brochure front to back, all 8 pages of it, and now I'm very excited. The best I can get is somebody said, yeah, I skimmed through it. Pretty pictures, someone holding a medical device. I don't find it to be as helpful or as credentializing. Now, marketing departments hate me when I say that, but
no, that makes sense, and that is a call to arms for marketing to be of more support to salespeople, right? Because we're all after driving revenue. We're all after the same thing. So with that, Tom, are big deals, 5, 6, 7-figure deals getting done right now, or has the marketplace just put a hold on everything? Is it possible to get deals done?
No. There are big deals getting done. So a couple of things that are being done is immediately you have to be relevant to what is the problem someone needs to have solved inside of the next 60 days. Time compression has occurred right now in the marketplace for evaluation of options, consideration of vendors or partners or whatever. If you can't solve my problem inside of 60 days, I don't want to hear from you right now. That's what always happens inside of moments of crisis. If you do have a solution for my problem, I want to talk to you right now. And I need to know that you can get results for me immediately, like within the first 60 days after I make a purchase relationship with you. So this time compression is very, very important to recognize. If you're talking to someone who is not under time compression, you might as well just put them in your list of people to contact later. So one of the first questions to ask anytime you make a contact right now is, how quickly do you need this issue to be resolved? Now, I can say in the United States, there's kind of 4 industries that are really driving a lot of these choices. One of them is anything that has to do with government spending. Most people don't want to deal with the government, but I'm sorry, in the United States, they just dropped $2 trillion in the marketplace. And in that portion, the government is moving around with some structured approach to that. I'll tell you right now, food production and food distribution, these folks have an enormous amount of issues that are going on inside of their place. So logistics companies are a part of what is going on in the marketplace, the things that need to be done right now. There is this entire issue of stockpiling. So there is construction and issues around the creation of those pieces. And of course, healthcare. That's easy to recognize as one of the areas where people, there's another interesting piece, and that's the entire communications industry. Mm-hmm. Whether it's high-speed internet or cellular phone or whatever, no one has the capacity that they need to have. Now, all the things I just talked about have 60-day cycles in which solutions need to be developed, and they don't have to be completed, but they have to be developed and moving forward. And so you're always going to, now there's probably other niches, but those niches right now, I can tell you, if you've got any tangential solution to those particular groups, you can go. Now, even in medical devices, all right, here's the interesting thing. An enormous amount of money has been released into the marketplace right now to help hospitals to deal with issues of capacity, not just COVID-19, but issues of capacity. We've become so efficient inside of our medical system that we don't have much flex to say 2 to 3% more than what we have. Every one of these hospitals will need capacity, more devices, more stockpile of everything that has to do with healthcare. If you're selling anything inside of the medical industry as it goes right now, money has already been released, but if it's not used, it will flex to another facility. So that's a problem that most people don't understand. Money's there, and if you don't spend it, you lose it. So it doesn't matter what the nature of your medical devices or medical supplies are or whatever. Somebody there has got a problem.
How much of sales in the good times, if we compare, we call this bad times, even though deals are getting done, good versus, the good versus perhaps the more, I don't know, tons of verbs we can throw in there. How much of it is logical in nature versus now it seems from what you're saying here, Tom, that a lot of this is just how creative you can be to link your product to one of these industries, to have the thought process and the business acumen to reach out and say, are you looking to get things moving within the next 60 days? It seems like right now it's almost like an entrepreneurial spirit that is required from salespeople rather than call 500 people or spam 700 people a day via LinkedIn and cold email.
So let me tilt a little bit of your question just a little bit. There was a time during what we call before, right? And it's interesting, before for us was before March 1. It's not that long ago, all right? If you looked at our calendar in Indiana, in the United States, there was like 1 or 2 COVID-19. Here we are, 6 weeks later, 500,000, almost 600 million, or 500,000, almost 600,000 people. That's a crazy number. Here's the point, though. The value sets of purchasing, let's just say February to March, were about what? Value, and they were about quality, and they were about service, and they were about price, all right? Now the orientation of the purchase is about speed and looking at quality, value, service, and price as being assumed to be of equal value across vendors who have met some minimum standard. Price has even actually dropped a little compared to speed. It used to be that price was ahead of speed. Now speed is ahead of price. So that is not going to change. Time compression will outlast what we have with COVID-19 or the recession or other pieces because people will be making decisions that have a flexibility of 60 to 120 days. You'll see contract periods shorten with the abilities to extend because companies are making major buys, want to know that they can step away if some sort of a catastrophic event occurs. So they want to be able to maneuver, even if they're buying cement, they want to be able to increase or decrease the amount of cement that they have to buy to meet certain contractual responsibilities. Speed and flexibility are now the new value set over price, right? Which was the prior one. So this will occur across all industries. An uncertain world favors shorter decision cycles and shorter purchase cycles.
And is that better for salespeople? Because it seems like speed, flexibility is the value that an individual salesperson adds versus price is probably passed down from the top down onto your shoulders as a salesperson. Maybe there's an opportunity to discount, and you probably shouldn't be discounting anyway. So is this a positive thing for salespeople? Should we be, as long as we keep our jobs and we can find our niche and the angle to sell and the messaging, should this be a positive thing for us?
I think it's a fantastic thing, but I'm pathologically optimistic like you are.
Well, I am as well. So I tried to phrase that in a way that there was some logic behind it. But let me ask you another question then, Tom. Should we train ourselves to be optimistic? Is this a success factor that we should be focusing on?
If you're in sales, you have to be optimistic. I mean that's a core requirement. The best people that are in sales, right? The most effective people, of course, are always positive. They're always looking forward. They always see inside of every cloud a silver lining. The reason I say that right now, this issue is favorable to salespeople is the issue of change, right? So if the world is valuing speed and flexibility, they're also valuing the ability on their own part as buyers to change as market circumstances change. Most of us in sales are looking for moments of willingness to change on the part of new buyers, right? Or moments that create opportunities for change. Those moments are being created for us. The value sets of flexibility and change are moving, and speed are moving for us. Distribution channels, which became single-threaded, right, for greater efficiency, say from China or quality, et cetera, from Germany or other kinds of things here in the States, they're fragmenting them out because their answer is I need to have a greater number of suppliers so that if one goes down during a period of crisis of any nature, that I can still retain my capacity to continue to operate. So if you haven't been able to get in through a door before because they were already closed off, they'd already had a relationship with somebody forever, they're already dedicated, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and say, let me step into that door because you had it closed before, but you don't want to be single-threaded anymore. And so new sales, there's a lot to be excited about.
Is this analogy valid, Tom? Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'm coming up with this on the spot, but if you imagine a deal is, on a desk, there's a piece of paper and that's a deal. The status quo is a weight on top of it. And typically we're trying to lift the status quo, insert ourselves into the business as a deal, as a partner, and then put the status quo back. Because obviously if we can lift it, a competitor can lift it and displace us in the future. Am I right in thinking now that the status quo, this weight on top of the deal, has just been thrown out the window? And that's how we should be looking at the opportunities that are in front of us?
I think the fast answer is yes. I think the fast answer is that let's take two pieces that offset that. One is that the buyers that we're talking to now are now buying in place. They have to make the decisions more quickly. They are expected to get different kinds of results more quickly. They feel under pressure. So I think that the status quo around who the decision makers has changed some. I think also the status quo of not trying new things is smart has become one of we have to try new things or do new things because I think, and I put this in some of the things I've said, if you want to be successful in sales right now, follow fear and failure. Follow those moments in which companies became fearful of their own position in the marketplace, their own ability to serve their customers, their own ability to sustain themselves, and follow those moments in which they failed. So if they weren't fearful and failure was the first occurrence, and then fear came afterwards, If you want to move quickly, look for those companies that had moments of fear and failure, and you'll move right in. Because when it's fear and failure, status quo gets thrown out.
That makes total sense. Do you know what? I like speaking to you anyway, Tom, but I'm actually feeling really good about being obviously we're in the sales training space as you are, but this seems like a great opportunity for salespeople to be up in their game, for brands to be investing into their sales teams. It seems like now, and we'll talk about a book and a webinar and some content from you in a second, but I don't want to, the whole conversation hasn't been to tee that up, but it inadvertently has done. It seems like now is a great opportunity. It's almost like, I hate to use this word, Tom, but it's almost like disruption, right? I know it's overused in Silicon Valley, and every coffee machine that adds a different type of milk is a disruptive technology. But it seems like that is genuinely happening in most industries right now.
The world just had a pandemic, all right? All of the rules have changed. I'm not saying that they've all gone away, but all of the things that were in place as what was the defined status quo on how we made decisions, what products and services that we need, how we were going to sell to them, what was valued in the sales process, what was valued in the buying process, what's valued in transportation. I mean, an interesting business to be in right now would be a business that said, we specialize in creating in-home offices. I mean, that would be a great business right now, wouldn't it? Because that's what's going to happen. People need in-home offices. Your kitchen table is okay for about 5 days. And then after that, the dogs, the kids, the delivery person, it's very hard to be in. But I mean, my point being is when you say, Tom, it sounds disruptive. Look, it's disruptive. We just locked down the entire world for 6 weeks. You're not making it up when you say it's disruptive. It's very disruptive, which means the status quo gets crumpled up, spread out like dust in the wind, and we get to start over. So I'm very, very excited about that for salespeople, because if salespeople are nimble enough to make these changes about, for example, what you and I talked about early on in this conversation, which was about how you generate trust. If they're nimble enough to move themselves forward in a new trust model, they will be amazingly well received by companies and people who find themselves to be in trouble. I mean, they're at risk. They have to change the way they did things, and they know that. And one of the other things that they know about that, forgive my continuing in that, they laid people off because there's things that were disruptive, right? They threw away their balance sheets. They had to go seek additional credit, right? They had to tell their boards, please take the financial reports and predictions we had for the year and get rid of them. Everything in what was in the business. And what's the first thing everyone's going to do? They're going to say, how do we make certain that we're prepared so this never happens to us again? Fear and failure, fear and failure. Look for the places that you serve where there was any chink in that armor, and there's going to be people that have challenges that are receptive to new salespeople.
Love it. Tom, well, with that, mate, tell us about the new book you've got coming out shortly. We'll get the show out before that to promote the book. Tell us where we can find it. And I know clearly you've been hard at work and focusing and strategizing on this. So I think there's a ton of value here for the audience to check it out.
Thanks. The book is called How to Sell in Place, Closing Deals in the New Normal. So how to sell in place. All of us will be traveling less. Many of us will be not traveling at all. So how do you sell in that environment that we've talked about right now? The book comes out May 5th. I believe 1 week from now, pre-orders will be available. And it's a Kindle book, and it'll be available obviously through Amazon. Will be where you can pre-order it. And it's called How to Sell in Place. That's the easiest way. And it's written with the president of our company and myself. So it's Cara Jane Moore and myself are the two authors of that particular book. And then next week, April 23rd, we have a free webinar called Selling in Place, where we outline truly a step-by-step. It's not one of those, conceptual pieces where at the end of it, this is take your notes, insert, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. Very excited about giving that away for free because there's so many salespeople that they need that. I mean, we just start off with the idea that they need that. The book came afterwards, and the book's going to be, I can't tell you what the price, the book's ridiculously, darn near free because we just want to get salespeople out there going with this. And then there's a program that'll come out about 2 weeks after that, towards the end of May, and it will be called, How to Sell in Place. And it's a multi-session online program that really builds out in depth each of the pieces that someone like the salesperson that you're talking about right now, the avatar of a salesperson out there who's saying to themselves, I used to look at my calendar and I was on the road every week, right? Or, for a full week or whatever. And now that's all gone. What am I going to do?
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to all of that. I'm excited. I'll be on the webinar. I'll be tuning in, Tom. I appreciate that, mate. We'll link to all that in the show notes of this episode over at salesman.org. Anything else to add before we wrap up? Anything else you want to share with the audience?
I want to share with them, this is a fantastic moment in time. There is a statement out there, and this is not cruel to say this, never waste a crisis. And when it says never waste a crisis, what it really says is go chase the silver lining in the cloud. You're not trying to unfairly take advantage. The crisis is the crisis. You had nothing to do with it. Now, how are you going to go help people in their world of their crisis? Are you going to stay back and say, I'm just trying to leverage you and take, and self-serve? No, they're the ones having the problem. Go help them. So.
Love it. Love it. Well, with Tom, mate, I appreciate your time, your insights. Just for the audience, me and Tom always end up with a shorter podcast because Tom gives me a ton of value before we even click record every time we jump on a call. So I appreciate that, Tom, the kind of off the podcast conversations that we have. And with that, I want to thank you again for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks so much, Will. I always love spending time with you.